Okay, so welcome. We are so excited to have you here. This is our monthly workshop. It's always focused on a certain theme of something that we're really interested in and passionate about. And that this month it is inner child, shadow work, and inspired by the Fool Tarot card, which is card 0 in the major arcana of the tarot deck. And it is a card of unlimited potential, represents the inner child. And so that's why we're talking about it. And our lovely guide, Adrenna, is going to take us on a deep dive of what the inner child is all about, the archetype, and a healing journey. So I'll let her introduce herself in a second and get into all of that. But if you don't know me, I'm Hannah. I'm the founder of 3 Moon Collective. And 3 Moon Collective is a wellness ecosystem, if you're not familiar. We support both wellness providers and wellness seekers. As part of our community membership, you get access to workshops like these. So we're so excited for the people who are here that are part of our membership and just joining. And I think that is all that I want to say at this moment. And love seeing you all continue to introduce yourselves in the chat. Super excited to get into this topic. So Adrenna, with that, I will let you take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Hannah, and thank you so much for having me here tonight. So guys, I am really excited to host this workshop tonight. One, because I'm super excited just to be around some fantastic females and women. So good to see all of you. So thank you so much for taking some time out of your evening to spend it with me and the 3 Moon Collective. The other reason why I'm so excited is because I am a nerd, and this blends my nerdy psychology self and my very nerdy spiritual self, and it blends the two together for just a night of nerdom. So if there's any fellow nerds out there, you know, maybe like raise your hand or something like that. There you go. Thank you. Know that I'm not alone. So tonight we're going to be working and diving into the inner child. And whenever Hannah and I were first talking about it, we talked about there's many different ways to approach the inner child. And one way that I am really familiar with in my background degree, which I'll introduce myself in a second, I promise. I have an undergraduate degree in psychology. And so we started talking about how it might be a really important idea for us to approach the inner child more like an archetype than kind of like this huge esoteric idea, and breaking it down that way. So once again, I realized I didn't introduce myself first. So I'll go ahead and do that. So my name is Adrenna Nicole, and the reason why I go by 2 of those is because some actually know me by Nicole in my yoga world. I'm still a yoga teacher, and I've been in the yoga world for probably 12 years now, and I owned my own studio in Anacortes. It did have to shut down because of COVID, but however, it gave me the most fantastic opportunity to focus on the spiritual side of me, my spiritual business, and really being out there as a spiritual educator and a spiritual healer. Outside of what I do, as far as like making a living and things that I'm passionate about, I'm a mom of 2 kids. So if you are a mama and you had to take some time out of your evening, thank you so much for doing so. I know that it can be really hard. And just some random facts about me. Obviously, I'm a redhead. This is natural. And my personality, yes, I am truly a redhead. I was born in Hawaii. I'm just trying to think of like some random facts here. And if I could eat any dessert in the world, it would be York peppermint patties that were frozen. So that way you guys.
Oh, did we lose Adrenna? Okay, hold on 1 second. She just got so excited, she just popped right off. I'll just text her. Okay, she's coming back. Oh, the fun of Zoom and internet connections. Her computer got unplugged.
Patties, but I didn't really. I'm here. Sorry about that. Thank you guys.
Yeah, it's okay. They got to hear my snap that I just learned this year. So
With the bend and snap, because I saw that in the chat. Yeah.
no, just a snap.
You just learned. Okay.
I just learned. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, continue.
All right. So anyways, that is enough random facts about me. Obviously, I got way too excited about that. So let's move on to the exciting topic of working with our inner child archetype tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and, Hannah, if you don't mind allowing me to screen share since I came back in. So I created an awesome PowerPoint for you guys this evening, so that way you guys have something to actually look at instead of necessarily just my face the whole entire time. So let me just get a second while this pulls up. All right. So if this is something that you would like to take notes, you are more than welcome to take notes, or this is really also just a place for you just to listen and to learn. However, I'm a note taker, so even when I'm not trying to learn something, it helps me concentrate. So basically, you do you this evening. So the title of our workshop this evening is Working with the Inner Child Archetype. And whenever you might hear the word archetype, I'm actually not sure what it is that you think about whenever you hear that word. And so in so many different areas of psychology, philosophy, spiritual work, there's actually a lot of different types of archetypes. As far as like Carl Jung, which we'll talk about soon. The other person that I'm going to reference tonight is Carolyn Myss. It's still kind of all in the same umbrella, but they have slightly different meanings or intentions. So I kind of want to first go through and demystify archetypes. And kind of, or not demystify, but just so we can all gain some understanding. So when I say like, hey, we're working with our inner child tonight, we actually know what it is that we're talking about, because like I said, you might come in with this other idea, just so we're on the same page. So let's go ahead and go to the next one. Okay, so our slide here is what is an archetype. So in definition, an archetype is a very typical example of a certain thing or a person. And so this is where we're kind of diving in or kind of teasing all of this out. So in this example, we're looking for, or what it really means is maybe that typical male that you think of, or like a typical female. And I think it might be really hard for us to think about this in our current time and age. We have lots of things evolving. So maybe like go back into the past and think about that 60s housewife, that typical female of that 60s housewife, and the typical male during that time. So that's kind of what a working definition of archetype is. Now, a lot of times archetypes actually show up in our literature. It shows up in movies. And so this archetypal layer is actually talking about the stories that come from many different cultures where there are typical characters. So for example, we can actually think about this kind of religiously, of how there's all a creation story. And that within a creation story, there might be a typical person within there, a typical archetype. So that's kind of what we're looking for. Now, some further examples, what you may have experienced in mainstream media, in books, films, etc., would be the hero. So let's think about the guy, I don't know if I remember his name, honestly, but for Guardians of the Galaxy, you know, like Chris Pratt was the actor. And he was on this, you know, he had this one job, and then all of a sudden he got called to do this, and he becomes the hero. I personally really like Harry Potter. Another random fact, so we can think about the heroes also being Harry Potter. Him coming in, saving the day, saving the world, that type of stuff. Another very common one that we're familiar with is the lovers. So I don't know who enjoys rom-coms. Anybody? Maybe. Okay, I enjoy a good romance story, and in that we have lovers, and we have people who randomly by chance or kind of off the beaten path get together. Within that, we also have those star-crossed lovers. Romeo and Juliet is going to be those star-crossed lovers, right? These two people who aren't really supposed to be together, two different families, and yet, you know, they fight for the love. So that's what we're looking, that's a working definition of archetypes in literature. And so here we have, again, in literature, right? So once again, we're gaining that background understanding. And this is what's known as the hero's journey. Okay, so this is actually what happens a lot. This is basically a formula. And so all of these archetypes have formulas that they kind of go through. And so I'm going to use, once again, Harry Potter as a reference, because I know that story like the back of my hand. So we have Harry Potter. He is our hero, and he is getting called to the adventure of going to Hogwarts. He then meets Hagrid, right? So if we're going down this, he meets Hagrid. He also gets an owl. He also meets some friends. So this is where that aid comes in, those guardians. And then he starts to have that first year, or maybe whatever year we're in, right? It starts to be some adventures. And then he has challenges. There's a mentor. There's helpers along the way. And then at some point, he's going to get thwarted by Voldemort again, right? And then he's going to have this transformation. There's going to be some sort of atonement that happens at Hogwarts, right? Like Dumbledore is saying, it doesn't matter. You can have all of these coins at the end of the year and you guys still win. And then at the end, there's some sort of a gift. So for Harry Potter, it was him like gaining that strength. I am so sorry for those of you who do not know the Harry Potter story. Star Wars actually works really great with the hero's journey. But sadly, I am still watching all of those with my son, so I can't really go into that. Are there any questions before I kind of go into anything else as far as understanding where we might see archetypes just in our normal everyday life? And you can unmute yourself if not. Okay, all right, cool. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Okay, so you know how
this is Laura.
Yeah, hi Laura.
I just had a question. So the kind of events in that cycle, are they I mean, I see how they kind of make sense to go in that order. Is there is it always like, is it pretty strict, this definition, or can it be like, are there a couple, you know, times where you get to an abyss, or there a couple returns maybe, like is that flexible in story making?
So I think that in story making or just anything that's creative, there is always room for flexibility. I will say that this is going to be the very typical, the very basic hero's journey. So at many points, you might find yourself in that abyss state. But to as basic as possible, we're looking at, it is typically around this journey, and you could follow it through stories, movies throughout the ages and through time. But I will say that this is basically, like I said, again, the most basic understanding of it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for asking a question. I do appreciate that. Okay, so you know how I was talking about where we understand this idea of archetypes, because we have archetypes in literature, we have archetypes in our everyday, you know, life and living. What I want to start basically is taking this really large vantage view here of archetypes and starting to kind of bring it in just a little bit more and approaching it strictly from a psychological standpoint. And while there are so many different psychology, we'll call them the psychology fathers, who really kind of brought on a bunch of new ideas, it is Carl Jung, who was a psychologist, who started to, he kind of was not necessarily battling Freud. There are definitely, in a Venn diagram, there's definitely some things that they have, you know, collectively as a belief or as a philosophy. But in Carl Jung's psychology, he started to kind of approach this whole idea of the id, the ego, the super id, all that kind of stuff, and started to open it up into this idea of archetypes. And so as you can see here, the psychology definition based upon Carl Jung is a collectively inherited unconscious idea, pattern of thought, image that is universally present in individual psyches. So once again, not needing you guys to necessarily understand the definition, but what we do want to understand is, in a second, as I'm waiting for my thing to move. Why am I having tech issues? Hold on. Oh, here we go. All right, oops, all right. Oh my gosh, we jumped ahead. Okay, all right, so we're headed back here. So we have the definition of a psychological archetype according to Carl Jung. And so now we need to go into what his actual theory is, because it's really important we understand about his theory so that when we actually talk about working with the inner child archetype as I work with it and how I have been working with it, it's really important to understand that Carl Jung believed that we have 12 archetypes that we all have, okay, that basically all have a purpose. It's all kind of leaning towards something, and then in that it provides something. So let's take a look here at a caregiver. So this is going to be down here like in that blue purple area. So the caregiver is an archetype. Its act or its like intention is to be of service, and it provides structure. If we go back to that hero over here in the orange, it's that idea of mastery. Okay, so you know, I'll bring in Anakin Skywalker here because I recently watched The Phantom Menace. So Anakin had to get older, right? He had to learn how to become a Jedi. And so he mastered, or he's working towards mastering these skills to what? Leave a legacy. Now, perhaps his legacy as Darth Vader was not the legacy that he wanted. However, he did leave a legacy. And so within us, we have a lover. We have the explorer, that one who really searches and wants freedom. We have that wise sage who is kind of like that mentor. It's kind of, this idea is kind of, we've taken it into a lot of different ways here in our modern day psychology, or even honestly just in kind of like this new age of spiritual that we're in. But you know, that is kind of like, we can consider it maybe like to be our higher self, right? Like that idea of understanding, and what we're looking to do is to explore spirituality. All of those in the green are looking for just something deeper within. And all of these archetypes, all of these aspects of ourself has a place. They have purpose. And the question is, are we aware, one, of our archetypes? And are we aware of kind of maybe how they're driving the bus? So I like to use the caregiver example, especially with us, you know, as a collective. There is a common thread, especially if you consider yourself to be empathic. We tend to kind of be that caregiver. We're nurturing, we're being of service. But to what extent are we only a caregiver? Are we trying to master our hero's journey, or do we get so caught up in this role of a caregiver? Where did that explorer go? Now, I know we're in COVID, so my explorer is currently searching the internet and just waiting to be able to find some freedom, you know, but just kind of understanding that all of these people within us, all of these cells within us, really what we're looking for at the end of the day is to be in balance. And when we're in balance, we're grounded, we're more functional. So by learning about our archetypes, we can say like, oh, wow, like I'm hanging out with a group of friends and I'm having such a good time. And this is where my jester comes in. This is where I like to be myself and make people laugh. And then all of that is about pursuing connection. And so just understanding that all of these roles within us, while we might not like some of them, for example, the ruler, the one who needs or desires control. As a mom, though, or even as a business owner, that ruler archetype, she needs to come in. You know, there are times where I can't let the, let's see, who would, you know, the jester, or even the, maybe even the magician coming in, right? Like there's just things where like you just have to get done. There are times to be a sage and for me to be my total spiritual, mystic, I call it woo-woo self. But if I'm so much that woo-woo, if this takes up most of my chart here, then where is that room for me being grounded or for me experiencing life if I'm just kind of all up here? Does that make sense before we kind of head on? I'm seeing some head nods. Yeah? Okay, cool. Okay, so you know how I was talking to all of you about how there are so many ways to approach archetypes. And whenever I was getting my undergraduate in psychology, archetypes and Carl Jung's theory was something that I learned in Psychology 101. And I'm going to tell you what, I hated it. I didn't care. I did not care about Psych 101. I wanted to know about like why people are the way that they are. And so basically what I'm trying to say is that I learned about this really early on, but I didn't resonate with it. Like I didn't resonate, and I was also in a completely different place in my life. I was in college and, early married, all that kind of stuff, right? And so I kind of took that off to the side and didn't really do anything with archetypes until I came across Carolyn Myss's book, Sacred Contracts. And I'm going to show you, this is what the cover looks like in here. And I don't know if you can still, this is mine now, and it's so beaten up, like the binds coming off and everything like that. And what this book allowed me to do was to understand archetypes in a different way and to understand them in a slightly more spiritual way. I believe that I was actually in yoga teacher training and I had to read her book, Anatomy of the Spirit, for my teacher training. And then I really liked what she had to say. So then I went on to this book. And I really like her idea of archetypes in this way. So Carl Jung says we have 12 archetypes and there's basically nothing that we can do about it. We're just looking for balance. Her approach is that our archetypes, all of those things, are actually guides for us. And particularly they are energy guides to us that have a lot of untapped wisdom and potential that actually lead us to our highest potential, or what you might consider to be a purpose. And I realize that I spelled her name wrong in all of these things, but her idea is very similar to Carl Jung. There are 12 and it's a circle. And hers actually coordinates with the zodiac circle. So if you've ever seen your birth chart or something like that, it goes along with that. But in her theory or in her idea of things, we don't have all of the same archetypes. And I do want to say really quickly is that the reason why I love her particularly and why I recommend her is that she is a medical intuitive. Yes. So she understands things from that energetic and that spiritual level. She also has her PhD. So she knows what she's talking about. She has done a lot of work in the psychology realm as far as archetypes and that type of stuff. And so to me, when I'm looking for like really solid resources, right, I'm going to look for someone that kind of has that combination here. And I highly, highly recommend her stuff. It actually completely changed my life. And I'm not kidding you whenever I say that. So Carolyn Myss did say that we have 12 different ones, but we all have the same 4. And so that's what I want to kind of talk to you guys about this evening is the primary archetypes. Now, if I were to be going over this theory of archetypes, I would go into all of these other ones. I'm going to briefly go over three of them, but dive deeper into the child, as that's the reason why we are here this evening. And so where this particularly came in for these 4 primary archetypes is that it's all about survival. So we all have, in Carolyn Myss's theory, we all have a child, a prostitute. I did not like hearing that one. The saboteur, didn't want to hear that one as well. And the victim, another one I didn't really want to hear about. So we have these 4 primary archetypes that are all about our survival that exist within us outside of these other 8. Now, what I will say, what is different with her is that she actually has a really beautiful, you can kind of make it a very ceremonial process of how to determine what your other archetypes are. And she goes over that in her book. And I will say that I actually did that with my therapist, and it was very eye-opening. And there are some times where I still kind of look back in my book and I'm like, where does my victim hang out again? All right, I understand. In the area of my finances. All right, I understand this. And so, so let's kind of talk about how, so Carol, you're going to see this like table here, right? And the reason why it's there is this is actually Carolyn Myss's idea of these archetypes, is that the table is our life and mission, but what supports us underneath are all 4 of those archetypes. And so I like to use analogies. I like to use other, things from, mainstream. And so we here have some of the characters from The Wizard of Oz. And so if we can approach these as the archetype of all of these, we can start to open our idea or our mind up to really what that might look like. So I'm going to start from the other side. So here we have the victim. The victim says, I am not responsible for anything that happens to me. The victim says, woe is me. It can be that tiny little violin. However, what I do want to say is that there also is a role for our victim in our lives where times that we have been victimized. So I just want to make that really clear, is that we hear this word victim, and in the term of psychology or in therapy, like, don't be a victim, don't play the victim. And what I'm saying is that this archetype might need that acknowledgement. However, we want to make sure is that in balance. Am I being victimized here, or am I using the victim archetype as a way for me to not do things, or for me to not take responsibility? The next one here is we have the saboteur. And the saboteur is actually, so think about saboteur as all it is self-sabotage. It is the self within us that says, all right, I know that I want to get this job. This job is perfect for me and matches alignment financially in what I'm doing. And there's a deadline. The saboteur does not want you to apply for this job. So it's going to distract you, and it's going to keep on pulling you away. It's like, nope, remember, you're not good enough for that job. You think you can make that much money? Excuse me. That's what the saboteur does to us. Yet it also protects us as well. So in all of these archetypes, we have a shadow and we have a light side. And once again, it's which side are we engaging with at that time. The next one here is we have the prostitute. If only I had a heart, said the Tin Man. Well, the prostitute is basically saying that, one, you're not going to sell yourself, and two, I like to think about this like financially. If you are self-employed or you work for yourself and you are choosing your own rates, are you actually getting the rate that you deserve? Because your rate also includes your education, your experience, and everything that it took to get you to where it is today. So the prostitute, once again, has a protective layer to us as well. And that's something that you can kind of go into with Carolyn Myss, because I do think that all 3 of these definitely have a place and definitely need to be explored more. Like I said, though, we are approaching or we're focusing on the child. And in The Wizard of Oz, it's Dorothy. It's Dorothy who is just wanting to go home. There's no place like home. There is something so childlike, and I'm sure even us as adults approaching that child, well, let's say you're on vacation, and I don't know when you get to that point when you're ready to go home. I know that I'm not in that point when I'm in Hawaii, but when I'm on the plane back, I just want to be home or back there. And so kind of thinking it in that way. And so just remembering that these 4 are the solid foundation. So if we think about it like that, then we know that the child is one of 4 solid pieces that we are needing for our survival. And so what does the child do for us? Like, why is it there? And the child establishes all of our perceptions of life, safety, nurturing, loyalty, family. And that child is all about dependency and responsibility. So thinking about the dependency of a newborn infant versus a 3-year-old, right? So the core issue is still dependency and responsibility, but it is going to change throughout time. And so the child, if the core issue of the child is about that responsibility, then what the child actually helps us to do is to know when to take responsibility for something, right? And that means when to take responsibility for things that we're not, or things that we did not do. When to have a healthy dependency, right? It is okay to be dependent on others. We thrive off of connection. That's actually why we're in such a mental pandemic right now. You also, this inner child is also helps you to when to stand up to the group. I don't know if you have any situation in your life where as a kid where you stood up for something that maybe you didn't as an adult, but I'll tell you what, my son did not do the best thing, but he punched someone on the playground or in the arm because they were speaking really bad about this other person and hurting their feelings. Now, once again, when to stand up to the group. He's 11. He's still figuring it out. However, he chose in that moment to stand up to this person, who I will say was actually the adult in charge. So let me just tell you that. So he chose to stand up to the adult in charge and say, no, I know, thank you. I know, I'll tell my son there's claps there. But when to stand up to the group, when it feels okay for us to do so. I felt like this as an adult with everything that happened last year with the Black Lives Movement of fighting just for basic human rights. And when do we stand up? When do we stand up for voting, for our politics, right? For our beliefs? It is our inner child that does that. It is not our current self. It is that child that says, no, I am strong in my beliefs. I am loyal to myself, right? And my perception of life is this, and I'm going to hold on to that. And also just when to embrace communal life, right? Like, so if we are feeling like we are taking responsibility whenever we are standing up to the group, you know, all that kind of stuff. And we can also say, this feels like a safe place for me to be in community, to be in communion. Sorry, I had some notifications. I was just checking on those. So, so diving a little bit more into the child here. So let's talk about cycle of life, right? So I mentioned to you that hero's journey, okay? And I don't want you necessarily to hold on to that hero's journey, but do think about our life like a cycle. And we can even approach it very like animalistic, right? So a butterfly has a cycle. We as human beings have a cycle. And so from the age of birth to 21, we have many, many times places where we spiritually and physically mature. The one that stands out to me the most, I think is the easiest, would probably be around becoming a teenager, right? So that physical maturity, so starting to get those hormones, body changes, etc. Spiritual, maybe even around that same age. Like, what do I believe? Or maybe not belief at that time, maybe that comes later. But we have several times within our lives where we are maturing, some of it biologically, some of it happening because of our current experiences. But all of these cycle of life, just like with a butterfly, if something doesn't happen the way that it's supposed to, right? Even just something small and minor, that caterpillar is not going to turn into that butterfly. And so when we have times or cycles of our life that aren't followed in the proper way, or let's call it the ideal way, then the adult finds it really hard to be responsible for themselves because the child is still kind of the one running around here and running the show. And so we can think about the cycles of life that kind of, I would say, need to be ideal or followed in order for this, and once again, an ideal world, which you don't live in, but like healthy relationships before the age of 7. So we have a solid understanding of what relationships are and boundaries and all of that kind of stuff. Puberty, I mentioned already, but even our first sexual experience. We have to really think about, and I mean, I just gave just off the top of my head there, you know, in this presentation, but there might be times in your life, right? Maybe there was loss early on in the life. And so, yeah, that cycle would have been broken, right? Trauma, that also breaks things, right? And so what happens is that if those cycles of life, so if those experiences aren't met in that ideal, healthy, nurturing way that the inner child is really needing, then your inner child says, I did not receive the nurturing that I needed and should have had to really become independent, to become really, truly responsible for myself. And so we can start to understand how important it is for us to maybe begin to work with the child. Understanding that while you and your current self are here, you also have these 12 other archetypes that are here as well. And tonight we're working with the one archetype that we all share, which is the child. And so I'd like to take some time here just to kind of get a break from you guys listening to my voice or even staring at the screen, is to perhaps grab a sheet of paper and begin to work with this question. What fears or challenges do I have that I associate with this archetype? Another way that you can look at this is, let's say you're working directly with your inner child archetype. Let's say you've already done some of this work before, and I do know that some of the stuff may be review for some or even most of you. So you can ask that inner child, what do you make me afraid of? And I'm going to ask you to list 5, and that's just to kind of get your brains going. I'll definitely give you some time here. So we'll think about maybe like, 2-3 minutes. If you guys really need more, I'm happy to offer that. And then I'd love to have some participation from you if you would like to share, or if there's one that you feel comfortable sharing, of just putting it into the chat. Yeah, so someone went ahead and put in abandonment. That's a legitimate, real fear. Thank you for sharing. Failure. Yeah. Our inner child doesn't want us to fail because it doesn't want us to be exiled or abandoned. We have another one, being fully seen. Yeah, I feel that one. like within my chest and within my heart. Yeah, being fully seen is really a challenge because you're putting yourself out there. Acceptance. Yeah. Disappointing others. I could list all of these for myself as well. I'll give maybe a little bit more time just in case. I do see some people still writing. What I do want to say that for all of you who are writing, for those of you that have shared, all of those are, we'll call it symptoms of an unhappy inner child, right? Our goal in life, if we think about that highest potential, it is to, and I'll go back to what you guys had put, it is to be in communion, to connect, not to fail, but to thrive, right? To be fully seen. Like all of these things are things that like can be fixed or can be worked with. And so understanding that all of those things are totally a normal and viable place. And sometimes just acknowledging that you're not alone, or even just acknowledging what you might be afraid of, is huge. And that can take a lot of hard work. Yeah, being neglected. Yeah. Our inner children, as you can see, and I'm sure that all of us can resonate with somebody else's, you know, whether it doesn't necessarily hold true for us, right? All right. So I want to thank you again so much. And if you're watching this replay at home, thank you for, you know, taking some time to kind of ask yourself what can be a scary question, right? Working with our inner child, I've talked to, you know, a few people about this kind of being scary. Yeah. And someone even wrote like a combination: abandonment, judgment from others, not being seen. Yeah. I actually want us just to like close our eyes for a second here and just kind of realize that even though that we are not together in one room, that we are together, and that you are so loved, you're supported, you're heard. And just by simply being here at this workshop, even if you are having to multitask, right? You're already healing that inner child. You're working with her, with them, he, open to all pronouns that your inner child might associate with. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about why we want to work with the child. Okay. And I talked a little bit about this earlier, but whenever we work with the child, we then get available some of these untapped resources that are connected to creativity. So our inner child is all about being creative, right? Like I don't know if, for those of you who have kids or been around kids, they love to create. They love to put themselves out there. And they have this, what I love about that inner child is that anything and everything is possible, or even just how exciting things can be. My daughter about a month ago like screamed in the car, and I was like, "What's up, babe?" She was like, "I've never seen a cow walk ever." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like how cute are you that you like this is like a big deal for you," right? And so we can think about that child as being, once again, if we're approaching it from Carolyn Myss's standpoint, that guardian of innocence. It guards our innocence, it guards us, and it helps us to heal, to repair. And it also helps to put a stop to our inner directed abuse. Because if we are healing our inner child, that inner directed abuse does not need to be there, right? We need more compassion. That child also inspires us to act outside of boundaries, or sometimes, you know, having that adult mind, you know, going straight to, well, how much does it cost? Well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Where the inner child's just like, what if? What if this happened? What if it just happens, right? And so with that being said, we need to give that inner child the support that they need. We need to give our inner child the support it needs to grow up. Because perhaps your inner child, where you're at right now, maybe you still kind of feel like that 7-year-old, right? That 13-year-old, even that 20-year-old. You have lots of inner children. I'm waiting for my computer to catch up with me. All right. So when we work with and heal our inner child, we can become aware of how the inner child has had a daily impact on our daily life. What my favorite reason for doing inner child work is to become more whole and healed, so we can become grounded and functional. And I mean actually functional, like not I'm surviving and I'm drowning with a buoy next to me, but like thriving, right? Like being outside of those waves. So we all feel better physically, mentally, and emotionally, feeling that whole sense. And because we're offering that work with that inner child, understanding that healing has no place in time or space, right? That we can focus actually on that present moment instead of the past. And so I'm pretty sure this is the end of, it is. Yep, okay, good. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop the screen share here. And from here, what we're all going to do, I'll check the chat really quick. Okay, all right, I saw that one. All right, is we're gonna head into, this was kind of like the whole reason why we are doing what we're doing tonight. And now I'd really like to actually take some time here to work with that inner child. And I'm loving your cat, Laura. So thank you for bringing your kitty with us. And I want you to go ahead and please find some sort of a comfortable position for you to take kind of a journey. So for those of you who are, maybe you practice shamanism or you're aware of that, is my meditations, you can call them guided visualizations, but they really are kind of like that journey. So just making sure that just like if you were headed into a physical journey, that you have what you need, right? That you're comfortable. You can choose to lay down if you want to, if you need to kind of move away from the camera, or you can also just stay right where you are. I'm not moving anywhere. And so I find it best to do this with closed eyes. I'm going to keep my camera on, but you might see me with closed eyes because I concentrate better. And so while you guys are getting comfortable closing your eyes, what I do want to say is that as scary as working with our inner child can be, we also have some agency and control over how intense our experiences are. And I think it's really important to understand that there may have been times where we weren't able to control the intensity. When it comes to our healing and our inner child, we do have power over that. And so I am setting the firm intention that the healing that gets taken place this evening is one that is very gentle, one that is compassionate, and one that you can easily integrate into your current self. And so with that, I'd like to start off with a few really nice, long, deep breaths. And so if you ever practice yoga or qigong or even tai chi, we're kind of looking for those belly breaths. So inhaling through the nose, exhaling maybe out of the mouth. Inhale and exhale. Allowing all of that information that I discussed with you earlier to kind of get tucked away in the brain for later information. And before we take this journey, we're going to begin to ground ourselves first. And so whenever I focus on grounding and embodiment practices, instead of solely focusing on my visualization, I also focus, and simply now more, focus on the actual sensation or feeling of being grounded. And so from your root chakra, the pelvic floor, or specifically anatomically at your perineum, imagine, visualize, or get a sense here for what is called a grounding cord. This cord connects you to the earth, but it's something that we have to actively and intentionally choose to ground. So from where you are right now, imagine, visualize, or sense that grounding cord coming through the seat. So your couch, your chair, the floor. Extending down to the floor. To the space underneath where you are. Maybe you're not quite out the dirt yet. Maybe you're still working through some wood, some cement, layers of housing. That grounding cord extends naturally further through, and maybe you now are inching your way to the earth. And our goal here is to extend that grounding cord even further into the earth. And at some point, we're going to look for or feel for a stopping point. We don't need to take that grounding cord all the way down to the core layer. It's okay to be in that first or second layer of dirt. And then let's imagine, visualize, or sense that energy from the earth below you coming up into your body, cycling energy. So maybe you visualize this with your inhales. As you inhale, you're pulling up that earth energy into your body. As you exhale, you're releasing. Doesn't matter. You don't need to know what is releasing. Just know that things are letting go. And while being firmly grounded, we're going to begin to open up a space of visualization. Opening up, perhaps this is your third eye. Perhaps this is a place in your brain that you can begin to see things. I also acknowledge not everybody is visual. And so you can feel free to explore other senses instead, like maybe what you hear or what you sense or what you even think that you might see or experience. And I want you to begin to imagine yourself in a place in nature that you feel comfortable in. So this is your special place. This is perhaps a space that you've been in before. But the sense that you have there is this nurturing, safety, support, and one of peace. You eventually begin to really feel like you're here, engaging the senses of what you see, feel. Maybe if you're at the beach or near water, you can hear that water. If you're in a forest, perhaps you're hearing forest sounds or animals. And with this really felt sense, you begin to notice a clearing up ahead. And in this clearing is this formless, beautiful being. And you recognize her immediately. This is your wise self, your higher self, the one who guides you. She's the one that you listen to for intuition, for discernment. And she is a part of you. Therefore, not a part that you need to be afraid of. We all have higher selves, and this is yours. An ally, a friend, a companion. And you begin to walk with her And notice that there is a circle on the ground. Maybe it's a circle that's been drawn out. Maybe it's made out of sticks, seashells, driftwood. And your wise self invites you to sit down with her. Knowing that this is a circle of trust and safety. And she has a message just for you. I invite you to give her a moment to offer this message to you, whether it's verbal, maybe it's a symbol, a gift. Allow yourself to be in communion with your wise self for a few moments. And you notice that the conversation or symbols or way of communication is starting to dissipate. She holds out her hand, and inside of it is a small bag with a gift inside. And a gift that's not for you, but one for you to maybe hold in your hand, place in your pocket. She stands up and helps you up. And with an open heart and compassion, you see a beautiful door just come out, kind of out of nowhere. She opens this door for you, so you know it's a wise choice. And she says, this inside is where we can work with your inner child. Know that she's giving you a choice here. You can step into that space. You can also choose to close that door and just take a seat at that circle and receive healing there. Anywhere that you're at is welcome. For those of you who are choosing to head through that door, you find yourself in the most beautiful white room. It has no limits or boundaries, yet you know that it does. Once again, this is a room, a special room just for you. And maybe you begin to notice what this room might look like so you can feel a little bit more comfortable. And then remembering that we're approaching this whole entire healing with the intention of being gentle and compassionate. And we are going to be working with an aspect of ourselves, an aspect of our inner child, one that is ready to be healed tonight. And in this space, you begin to see her materialize. In this space, she's always safe. In this space, she's always protected. And in this space, she gets to choose how much healing, if any healing, she gets to receive. Maybe you even begin to notice what your inner child is wearing, what she looks like. Are there bangs or ponytails? And maybe you know why she's here. Maybe you know the reason why this inner child has shown up to be healed or to be willing to work with you. Maybe you have no idea. The good news is you don't have to know. Simply allowing that inner child to come forward is healing in and of itself. And we can stay with our inner child just as we are, or we can begin to work with her a little bit more by asking her what she needs to be healed. Allowing her to have a space to speak and a place to be listened to is so healing. And you can stay with her just like that and just simply acknowledge what she needs. Can also ask her, what would she need in order to feel safe? At some point, that inner child divided themselves and got frozen or stuck somewhere out of fear when you already named those fears. So what would they need to feel safe? You can hand her the gift that your wise self, that higher self gave to you. And then what would happen if that inner child received what they truly needed? And then visualize that inner child receiving that, receiving what she truly needed to feel safe, to feel healed. And if your inner child is willing, there's one other thing that we can do here. We can allow that inner child to release as much as she feels ready to let go. As much fear, anger, overwhelm, or other emotions. Some people find it helpful to visualize a white or even a light color coming into that inner child to support and to take away the anger or pain that they experienced or are experiencing. Allow this inner child to receive as much healing as they are ready to. Noticing if your inner child begins to disappear a little bit. You can allow her or him or they to disappear as soon as they are healed. Your inner child may not completely disappear at this time. Your inner child may still need some healing. Know that I'm continuing to hold space for this healing even after this workshop for that to take place. And whether your inner child is there still or not, begin to thank your inner child for being willing to come forward to work with you. Your wise self begins to appear again, almost as if she was already there the whole entire time. Smiling even brighter than she was before. She opens up that door as you gently step back into that space that's just for you. For those of you who stayed in that circle, receiving the healing that you needed, we're all going to begin to make our way back, making our way back to our physical body, leaving that beautiful white space and your sacred space. Perhaps even bringing along that wise self, that higher self with you. Keeping your eyes closed and feeling into your body. Ask for your body to shift and change based upon the healing that took place this evening. Tell your body also your current age. You can simply just say, I am blank years old. Thank your mind, body, spirit, inner child, wise self for showing up this evening. Bringing your awareness back to that grounding cord, back to that anchor, being tethered by the earth, that place of constant support, constant nurturing, compassion. Notice any sensations within your body. And then begin to take 2 really long and nice deep breaths in and out. Inhale and exhale. Taking your time, really truly taking your time to notice the space that you're in, perhaps the 4 walls. Notice what's around you and maybe begin to eventually open your eyes. If you practice yoga, maybe like when you're coming out of Shavasana and you wiggle your fingers and toes, or maybe you circle those wrists and ankles, or you're even reaching your arms over your head, stretching out those toes. All right. So I know that some of you guys are coming back from that's why I call it a journey. But it's my understanding that the way that these work is that we offer the workshop and then time for Q&A afterwards. So this is something that if you want to participate in, you can stay on until 7:30. However, if you had a experience and you are just ready to kind of get back into that, or you have other obligations, I want to thank you so much for spending your evening with me, for learning about the inner child, and for taking some time to truly, truly explore the inner child in a way that is embodied. I know that we can write letters to our inner child, and there's a lot of things that we can offer that inner child, but whenever we start to bring it into the body is where we really start to feel and know that change is happening. So you guys all did some super hard work this evening, so I do hope that you can rest. But like I said, we'll kind of open this up to questions, comments, and then if this is the end of your evening, then I want to thank you so much from my spirit, from my heart, for spending it with me.
Thank you, Adrenna. I'm also going to pause the recording in case there's anything that anyone wants to share more personally or privately or whichever.